So I practice a little MMA. I think MMA is the coolest sports ever, but it's undeniable that these athletes are getting significantly underpaid, and I want to do some MMA fights, potentially a UFC fight or two. But why are they paid so little? We're about to figure that out today. Why are they paid so little? We're about to figure that out.
We all know the UFC underpays fighters, especially starting contracts on 10,000 to show, 10,000 to win. But have you ever really asked yourself, why?
Crazy.
Don't have enough money. For example, at UFC 306, the worst floor seat cost was $12,000. One seat, $12,000. That means one chair was worth more than a fighter who showed up, fought, and lost. So why is this happening? One short, one long. The short answer, they don't need to pay more. The long answer, let's break it down.
One seat is more than what they're paying the starting fighters. One seat covers what they made in the fight. Everybody's there to see these fights, and a single seat is worth more than what they're going to get paid for. It's crazy. Obviously, there's a build up to
In the
more
2000s,
income, but
MMA wasn't just the UFC. There was real competition like Pride in Japan, Strikeforce in the US, WEC, or Elite XC. If you were a fighter back then, you had options. And because you had options, the UFC had to pay more. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a monopoly. But instead of fighting competition, they did what billionaires always do. They bought the competition. Pride bought and shut down. Strikeforce bought and absorbed. WEC gone. Elite XC collapsed. And the UFC
obviously,
picked up the pieces. One by one, the options.
the quickest way to grow any business is with an acquisition. You buy a bigger business and you buy a smaller business and you combine it into your business. If you have competition, you buy out the competition, you combine it into your business. You take the best processes from them and you include it into your business. But to think that they destroyed it that quickly, I had no idea they had monopoly like
When the
that
dust settled, only Bellator was left standing. At first, Bellator was a solid competitor. They picked up whatever the UFC didn't want anymore, like Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen. They had few solid names like Are You Not Entertained?
No, you not! Entertained!
Patricio Pitbull, Michael Venom Page, Douglas Lima, Shlemenko, and others. Bellator wasn't the UFC, but it was real. It kept some pressure on the system. Until it didn't. Over time, Bellator fell apart. Bad business, bad matchmaking, bad leadership. And while Bellator crumbled, the UFC kept rising. The 2010s were the years of McGregor. Massive fights, massive pay-per-views. By the mid-2010s, the UFC wasn't just the biggest promotion. It was the fight game. Everything else, just leftovers. Once the competition was gone, everything changed. The UFC didn't have to fight for talent anymore. They owned the talent. If you were a fighter, you had two choices: sign with the UFC or fade into obscurity. Bellator tried to compete for a while, but it never reached the same level. And now, Bellator is gone too.
UFC has the backing of PN. They have all that support. They have so many different networks to support. No, they don't. They don't have the backing of ESPN. Well, they do have the backing of ESPN, but they just have so many networks, so many connections, so many relationships with other businesses that would be relationships you'd want to prepare yourself into being the only fighting league. And one championship, I saw him pull that up, is still existent. It's still big. Demetrius Johnson was fighting for them. They still have great competitors. But in terms of the eyes, they truly are all on UFC. And honestly, that's not even doing too hot right now.
Called option off the table. The UFC became the gatekeeper to fame, to money, to legacy, and when you control everything, you control the prices too. Now yes, if you're a big name, you're probably getting paid. Adesanya, John Jones, or Paddy Pimblett, you're bringing eyeballs, you're moving numbers, you're valuable. And for those guys, the UFC cuts bigger checks, as they should. But for the rest, for the guys trying to break through, the starting pay is the same garbage it's been for over a decade. 10 and 10, since at least 2010.
That is crazy.
Dollar bonus, same as it was back in the Brock Lesnar. Meanwhile, the UFC's business exploded. The pay-per-view prices went up, the gate numbers tripled, and Dana White can't stop talking about how he's breaking all the gate records.
Yeah, on those pay-per-view prices going up, I've seen a lot of people switch over to pirating because of that. I don't know if that's best for their business model. The increase in the pay-per-views like that. There has to be a better system. I'll talk about that in another video on things that I think the UFC can improve on. Easy ways they can be making money that they're leaving on the table.
He now holds number 1, 2, and 3 highest gate record of all time at the Kaseya Center.
The UFC is making 10 times what they were in 2010. But fighters at the bottom, they're stuck at 10 and 10. Maybe you can live with the fact that the UFC is a business first. But the one thing that shouldn't slip through the cracks is the starting contract. 10 plus 10 is disgusting. It's criminal. Let's do the math. You fight for 10 and 10. You lose. You only get 10. You pay taxes. Now you're at 7. You pay your trainer and your manager. You're left with 4, maybe 5. $4,000 for months of training, weight cuts, brain damage. Honestly, it's literally better to beg on the street than to lose a UFC fight. It's not just about low pay, it's about control. The UFC controls everything: who you fight, when you fight, what you get paid, and what sponsors you're allowed to have. You want to wear your own sponsor in the cage? Nope. Only UFC approved logos. And guess who gets the check?
Okay, if you don't get this, you're gonna say it's corny. But the bottom line is there are like 3 places for men who have the genes that would have made them like a successful warrior or pillager or conqueror in the past. That's business, that's the military, and it's a fighting league. And obviously there might be a few other ones throughout the cracks, but the only ones that are truly going to fulfill the urge and the desire to compete are going to be fighting in the military, go on these special forces. And there's no other place where you can make money for being violent anymore. As bad as that sounds, right? As bad as that sounds. So not only is it a monopoly on the fighting league, but it's a monopoly on ways that these men can make money and be the most content with their lives. Because yeah, they suffer, but it's masochism. It's a suffering that you love when you're doing this.
Remember when fighters could earn real sponsor money? 5 figures, 6 figures. Now they get a tiered bonus based on how many UFC fights they've had. And it's not just sponsors. The UFC controls pay-per-view money too. You'd think if you're a champion, then you got, let's say, $0 per pay-per-view buy, and your fight sells 1 million pay-per-views, $2 million, right? Nope. Here's how it actually works. From 0 to 500,000 buys, you only get $1 per buy. From 500,000 to 750,000, you get $1.50. Only after that, from 750 to 1 million, you get $2 per buy. So instead of getting $2 million, you get $1,375,000. So even if you sell out the arena, you're still getting scaled percentages like it's a phone data plan. And here's the thing, you can't complain, you can't speak out, because if you do, you might never get booked again. This isn't just about fighter pay, or sponsorships, or contracts. It's about how the business is structured. The UFC isn't just a fight promotion, it's the center of the MMA world. Now, if you want to be seen as the best, you fight in the UFC. Simple as that. The UFC decides who gets signed, who gets pushed, who gets paid. You don't negotiate like a free agent. You accept what's on the table or you don't fight. And most fighters can't afford to walk away, because there's nowhere else to go. That's just what happens when one company becomes the market. The UFC built that dominance. They earned it, but it also means they don't have to share much.
Today, I'm working with Topps and giving away a prize pack of trading cards worth over $5,000.
Maybe this is just how the fight business works.
If you don't like it, there's a simple solution to this problem. Go start your own MMA organization, no barrier to entry, knock yourself out, pay them whatever you want to pay them.
But if you're a fighter entering that system, you should know.
Lots of elements of that equation that I had not thought about. Very good video. UFC does seem awfully a lot like a cartel. That's some good new information. Have a good day.